Thank you for joining. My name is Dean Keir, and I'm part of the EU advisory team here at Holborn. I'm joined today by Jacob Shelton, who's also an advisor at Holborn with an expertise in assisting US connected clients that move to Europe. And I'm also joined by Anne Della Victoria, who's co-founder and CEO of Easy Start, who are a relocation visa assistance specialist and can help you with everything to do with your move from the US to France, or from anywhere to France for that matter. Today's session is really designed to give you a clear roadmap for the relocation process. We'll cover immigration requirements, financial planning considerations, tax residency rules, and wealth management strategies that are available to you once you become an expatriate. So whether you're moving from work or already there, you're moving for a lifestyle, retirement, or just a new adventure, we're here to try help make that journey as smooth, compliant, and financially efficient as possible. So without further ado, as I mentioned, your speakers here, Anne and Jacob, I'll allow them to introduce themselves once they're part of the presentation comes. So a bit about ourselves here at Holborn Assets. So as we were established in 1998, we are primarily a wealth management and financial planning practice, and effectively hold the rights and regulations to provide advice in over 150 countries worldwide. We've got, at this moment in time, we've got about 20,000 clients via our 18 international offices with about 500 employees presently. And effectively, where we come in is we assist people like yourselves that are either looking to move or already have moved to a new country, and assist with helping you understand the complexities in terms of tax, financial planning, and everything in between. And it's sort of never too early to get in touch with a financial planner when it comes to planning your relocation abroad. And obviously today's focus will be on France. And with that, why would you choose France? Well, there's a number of reasons, and I've listed some here. As you'll very well know, France, I believe last year in 2024 was the #1 most visited country in the world. I think it had 90 million visitors for holidays. So it's no secret exactly what attracts people to France. There's a wonderful lifestyle there, and there's also an incredible work environment, top class healthcare, and as well as that, there's a bit of a vineyard there. Wine, in my opinion, has always been a good reason to go anywhere. And I take that into my social life as well. There's also a multitude of financial benefits in terms of planning, and a sort of more, I guess, depending on what stage of life you are in and where you're actually looking to move, there can be a more relaxed atmosphere, but also there's plenty of fast-paced environments if you're still within your working life and still want to be sort of within that. I'm going to pass over to Anne to introduce herself and tell you a little bit about, understanding what visa you might be looking for. It's obviously the first question is where you want to move. The second question is, well, what do I need to do to actually get the rights to live in that country? And with that, I'll pass you over to Anne.
Thanks so much, Dean. I appreciate it. And thank you so much to Jacob for also joining us too. So lovely to see some new people here, and also a few people that I've already spoken to in the past, and kind of getting to readjust themselves and kind of figure out what exactly they want to do. Maybe they're in the process of planning on moving now instead of when we spoke about it later. But so it's nice to see some friendly faces. Yes, so Dean, you are correct. The first thing you need to think about is what kind of visa you need to have to be able to move to France. Some people say, oh, I just want to get up and leave, long stay visitor visa will be fine for me. No, that's not the case. Each situation is very different per person, so you need to figure out what exactly you need in terms of visa to be able to do what you want to do in France. So we have various visa options. Of course, you have the short stay visa, which is up to 90 days. Those from the US, which I'm assuming a lot of you are from the US at the moment, and also from the UK, do not need this visa at all. You can just come into France without having a visa, and you can stay in France for 90 days. That's no problem. Short stay visas are typically for those who are from various other countries. And if you have those type of questions, if you don't know, you're more than welcome to reach out to Easy Start, and one of our advisors will advise you if you need to have that short stay visa. Next type of visa for those who are staying long term, 6 months to 1 year, or even longer, who are retiring, working, or studying, you can go on to a long stay visitor visa. So a long stay visitor visa, depending on what kind of visa you have, there's VLS temporary visa, which is for those that are 12 months and below. But you also have the TS visa, which is 12 months renewable. So just keep this in mind when you apply for the long stay visitor visa, that you are compliant with your type of visa that's given to you by the French consulate. So if you're planning on staying and retiring in France, make sure you end up applying for something that's more than 12 months. Otherwise, you will not be able to renew, and then you have to go back to your home country and reapply, and this is not what you want to do. So just make sure when you do your visa application, you know what type of visa they're applying for. This is all done on the French Visa Wizard, on the French government website, and just there's different options. Just make sure you have more than 12 months, or if you're less than 12 months, make sure you have 6 to 8 months, etc. Again, typically this type of visa is a work type of visa. Well, when they say work, okay, let me step back here. Long stay visitor visa, technically, this is a gray area. You're not supposed to be working on this type of visa. However, there are cases where if you're working remotely, you're not working with French companies or clients, then you can work remotely on this visa. However, it's not recommended. If you want to do activities in France, I typically recommend that you go on a different type of visa, which is either the talent passport visa for skilled professionals, or their self-employment visa, which is more like freelancer status. So if you're, have a company, for example, and you're self-employed, self-employment visa would be the best one, and that's called an entrepreneur profession liberal visa. And then the talent passport visa is a plethora of different things. So feel free to reach out to us about the different types of talent passport visas, because you have the création d'entreprise visa, which is those who are creating kind of a company that's scalable in a way, and you want to expand on this company, etc. Whereas a self-employment entrepreneur visa is just yourself, and you're starting off, as a freelancer. However, you can switch over to création d'entreprise visa later on if you want to scale and build your company. A lot of people do this. A talent passport visa as well is for those who are also skilled professionals who found a job in France and are relocating into France for that specific job. So there's different types of visas, such as a qualified salarié visa. Usually that ends up as an EU blue card, I would say. And this is one of the best visas you could possibly have, just because if you have an EU blue card, you can go over to a different country later on easily in Europe to be able to work there as well. It's much, much quicker. Anyway, those are the different types of visa options. But in terms of the timeline for those visas, you have, give or take, I would say around 3 to 6 months, depending on which visa that you are going to be applying for. Normally, you want to apply for the visa 3 months before your move, and processing time is around 1 to 2 months, depending on which type of visa that you have as well. So I would say altogether, if you're going for, let's say, a short stay visa, if you're from the US, no need for the visa. Long stay visitor visa, give yourself, I would say, 1 to 3 months. Talent passport visa and a self-employment visa. There's extra steps related to this regarding asking for the government to, if your business is viable, or if you have contracts with a company, etc. Give yourself around 4 to 6 months to prepare yourself. Voila. Next slide, Dean. Preparing for the move. So yes, this is extremely important. Administrative preparation, of course, gathering your necessary documents, especially for your visa application. So this could be your passport, birth certificate, proof of funds. even criminal records as well, depending on which kind of visa that you're applying for. Translate and notarize any documents if needed. Not all visas need to have your birth certificates translated, notarized, just so you know. So feel free to come over to us at Easy Start and we can let you know what kind of documents actually need to be, translated or notarized. Long stay visitor visa, I know, doesn't necessarily need to be apostilled or notarized or translated. You can just use your current birth certificate and send it in. Make sure it's a copy, guys. Don't send in your real birth certificate to the French consulate. You will not get it returned to you. So everything has to be a copy because, again, they will not return it to you. The only thing that's going to be real and sent over is your passport to the French consulate, okay? Just keep that in mind. Healthcare considerations. For retirees, prepare for the French healthcare system. So research what PUMA documents are and what you need to be able to set yourself up through the PUMA system, okay? The healthcare in France is amazing, by the way. It's one of the best in the world. So essentially, you want to be part of this. However, healthcare in France takes a long time to set up. So it could take from 3 months to 1 year. And depending on which visa that you applied for, let's say a long stay visitor visa, you cannot apply for the specific healthcare system until 3 months that you reside in France. So just prepare for yourself to have at least travel health insurance, which is one of the most mandatory things for your visa application, to be fair. That can, be on a basis of rejection if you don't have the proper one. They want you to be covered in France for up to 30,000 euro for the year. And again, there's other, qualifications, specifications for that, but you need to have the best travel health insurance for at least 1 year while you set yourself up in France. And for retirees, research the PUMA and what documents you need to bring that over into France with you. In terms of packing logistics, if you are moving all of your things, such as your furniture, your car, which personally I do not recommend shipping over your car, but we can have another chat about that later on. It's better just to buy a car in France, to be honest, because registration can be a nightmare. But however, if you do plan on shipping over your things sorry about that, guys. Oops. If you do plan on shipping over your furniture into France, make sure you choose a, logistical relocation company or moving company that is, reputable, that's good. And also make sure that you have your timeline set. So if you're going to be applying for your visa at some point and you know that you're going to be moving, but you don't actually know if you're moving yet, I would say hold off on shipping off your furniture until you actually have your visa. Otherwise, it's bad timing for everyone. And also in terms of packing and logistics, make sure that you book an initial accommodation. Short-term accommodation, such as an Airbnb, would be sufficient enough. You do need this for your visa application, and that's where the catch-22 comes in. We have clients come over to us and say, oh, but we need housing in France. How are we supposed to find housing if we're not in France? Well, you can get an Airbnb. They just want to know they're not going to be homeless on the street when you arrive in France. So as long as you have an address, try to get an Airbnb or some type of short stay rental through a company, or even staying with your friends, for example, just so they see that you are going to be somewhere in France when you arrive. Normally, we like to say this too, because when you find housing in France, which we will get to soon, you really need to have patience. So around 2 to 3 months to find your proper long-term housing would be good. And the timeline for this, starting preparations, honestly, this depends on each individual and family, but normally it should be, again, around 6 months before the move. And you should book your flights around 1 to 2 months before moving. Typically, I usually recommend booking refundable or cancelable flights just in case anything happens, if there's any delays. And so when I think of, when I spoke about, accommodation, finding housing in France, have a lot of patience through this process. It's not the same as in the US and the UK for sure. The real estate rental market is very demanding in France. So there are two key considerations that you should consider, of course, is renting versus buying. Two very different things. First, I would recommend, again, getting Airbnb temporarily and then finding a rental for about, 6 months to a year if you plan on buying. I would say this is the best way to move forward in your relocation if you plan on purchasing property later on. It's better to see a place and have a feeling of where you're going to live than to be remote and arrive with surprises. So
I, I think that is something actually big if you're planning to relocate anywhere, is if you don't know the area all too well, is really to rent somewhere, even if it's for a month, just to get a feel for the place before you commit to buying. So then all of a sudden you'll find you've bought a property and it potentially is somewhere that's not suited to you.
exactly. Sometimes, we have clients, I'm sure Holborn has clients that go to, let's say, Paris, and they say, oh, actually, it's too crowded here for me. I want to move somewhere
Hmm.
else. You know what I mean? It's better to go to the country, see if you feel good in that specific place, and then move somewhere else. Maybe you're lucky, you really enjoy the area that you move to, but at least you'll find different areas within that city, for example, or town where you actually want to live. And again, it's much better to see the apartment or the house physically than to get some surprises when you move. I mean, remote visits are fine or whatnot. I know there's real estate agents out there that offer remote visits and everything like that, but it is better to be on ground than to be remote. I do know that some people also, try to find housing before moving into France, which is okay. You can do that, for example, if you want to, take a small trip to France to find your housing then and sign a lease for whenever you arrive. Sure, feel free to do that. But I typically recommend making sure that you have your visa before doing all of this and making sure that you're actually able to come to France before doing it.
What would you say the typical kind of processing time is for the majority of visas? I know it can vary. It can very much also depend on how much input someone's having into it and how on the ball you are. But best case scenario versus worst case scenario.
That's a case scenario. So actually, we've had clients come to us and they got their visa within like 2 or 3 weeks. All
Okay.
preparation, going to their visa appointment, visa in hand, very quick. But then there's others who are, slowly taking their time, and that's totally fine.
Hmm.
Who has, obligations, with, family, their personal things in their home country. So they want to prepare and do it well, for example, and that's totally fine as well. Everyone's timeline is very different. And at EasyStar, we're very flexible and, empathetic about everyone's timeline. So I say for, best case scenario, you receive your visa within a couple of weeks from, you hand it in, and then
Yeah.
legally, I would say France has 2 months to give you a reply, just so you know. Um,
Okay.
that's the legal limit for the French consulate to give you a reply is 2 months.
And they generally tend to adhere to that.
Yeah, typically,
Very
yeah.
good.
They typically adhere to that. Normally, if it's a rejection, it's takes a bit longer, and then you'll receive a letter. Uh,
Okay.
but sometimes, if they know that there's missing documentation, you'll receive a rejection right away. So it really depends. I mean, we've seen all different types of cases, but yeah, essentially, it's 2 months wait time, the worst worst wait time
Yeah.
if you were to submit your application to the visa to the French.
No. Excellent. And I guess in terms of rejections, what would you say is the kind of most common thing that maybe somebody forgets to prepare, and ultimately that can cost them the chance of getting the visa sorted first time around?
Honestly, it really depends on the type of visa you're applying for. So
Hmm.
if you're applying for a long stay visitor visa, you should technically everyone needs to have travel health insurance, basically.
Yeah.
Major means of rejection if you don't have the proper one. Also savings and financials. This is really important. So if depending on the type of visa that you have, if you cannot show that you can support yourself living in France without quote unquote working on a long stay visitor visa, for example, this can be an automatic rejection. So we actually say this quite often where people come to us and say, oh, I got rejected. I don't know why. We submitted all the documentation that they asked for. And then we see their documents and we see that, okay, their financials are not very strong. They want France to
Hmm.
know that you have strong financials to be able to stay in France. So for a long stay visitor visa, we typically recommend around 24 to 25,000 minimum in your
Yeah.
savings account to be able to get accepted for your visa. However, if you are coming over for a job, you don't necessarily need to prove that you have this amount of money because you will be getting income coming in. They're not that worried about it. They want to know mostly about if you have a signed contract with a French company, how much your salary is going to be, etc.
Hmm.
Self-employment visas, however, are different. So if you're going on a profession liberal visa, normally you want to prove that you have at least 15,000 euro in savings. Because what they're going to assume and what your financial planning is going to assume is that you're going to gain revenue once your business picks up throughout the year.
Yeah.
So this really varies, I would say. And I would say finances is number one, and travel health insurance is another in terms of the rejections of visas.
Okay, very good. So plan and prepare
Always.
is effectively key. And by the way, everyone, there is a Q&A box there. Feel free to use it if anything's not covered. If any queries, we will have a Q&A section at the end, and also you can book a consultation at the end as well. So if anything's not covered off, please feel free to pop it in there.
Yeah, perfect. So where were we? Oh, okay. So other administrative
It's a
things.
bit of a busy slide, this one. So yeah,
Yeah,
best of luck with that.
that's okay. We're gonna go from opening bank account to adjusting to life in France, to common challenges, and then we're gonna do some final tips and resources. So opening a bank account and managing finances. Again, well, Holborn can help you with the managing the finances section as well. But basically opening a bank account in France for Americans particularly can be a hassle because there was a law that's been passed a couple of years ago, not even a couple, I would say 6 or something years ago, where it just makes it a bit more difficult for Americans to apply and open up a bank account due to this law. And the reason being is because everything that's done through the bank has to be also sent in to the IRS. And the bank in France, like France does, is a
Mhm.
little bit lazy. So they they don't always want to do it's not because they don't like Americans, it's because they're just, as we say in French, le flemme, to just open it up. Do the extra administrative process. So that's actually the only reason why. However, at Easy Start, we have partnerships with banks on the ground like BNP Paribas, Credit Mutuel, for example. And we also have partnerships with like online banks such as Bank N26 and Revolut. So normally what we tend to tell clients is arrive in France, forget about, trying to open up a bank account abroad. Unless you're purchasing property, then you can open up a non-resident bank account. However, that's an administrative process in and of itself before you move. But normally worry about the bank account once you arrive in France because you cannot open up a bank account without a housing lease anyway. So what we typically like to do is we tell clients, you can open an online bank account with Bank, for example, with just your visa. You don't necessarily need to have a housing lease. If you want to provide your Airbnb address, feel free to do so. At least this allows you to open up utilities for your actual house in France. And then once everything is set up with your housing, then you can go and open up a local bank account with BNP Paribas, Credit Mutuel, Societe Generale, etc. Whatever bank you wish to set yourself up with. Just remember that the process can be quite long. So have patience in this process, like every types of administrative process in France. And always required documents are going to be passport, proof of address, like I just mentioned, you need housing. Airbnb is not going to cut it. And your residency permit, which is your visa. And the timeline for that, you can research your banks before moving, but I suggest opening it up when you're here. Opening account can be 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes a little more if they're asking for more documentation, I would say. Adjusting to life in France. So essential registrations that you want to do, I had mentioned Social Security and healthcare registration. So Social Security in France is not the same as Social Security in the US. Social Security is part of your healthcare, and this also surprised me when I moved to France. I was like, oh, but Social Security is associated with, my taxes and everything like that. No, no, no. Social Security is associated with your healthcare. You also have a different number for your taxes. So keep that in mind. If you're on a long stay visitor visa, like I mentioned before, you cannot apply for the healthcare system until 3 months after you've arrived in France and you've been situated in France. Then a lot of patients through this process because they're not the most organized organization. So if you send in your documents to them and they get back to you saying, we need your birth certificate, even though you sent it in 3 times already, just be very patient. Best thing is to try to follow up with them as much as possible. You can give them a call, and they actually do have an English speaking person if you just go through the long process of choosing the different numbers as they do. And then you will get someone and you can just ask, hi, I'm just wondering where my application is, where it is, etc. As long as you're persistent about this, you will get your, what we say, carte vitale and your social security number quicker. Other aspects of France and adjusting to France is your tax and legal obligations. This is extremely important because if you do not abide by these tax and legal obligation and rules, you won't be able to renew your visa at the end of the year or whatnot. They will ask for these specific documentations. Even if you're not making any income, you still have to declare 0 on your taxes. This is something maybe Holborn can also assist you with in terms of like explaining all of this as well. However, it is really important to know your tax obligations and also when your taxes are due in terms of declarations. Sometimes some people have a certain deadline, depending if you're like an entrepreneur or if you're a retiree or whatnot, then another deadline is, for you. So usually I recommend getting an accountant or some type of financial person to help you with this process, at least for the first year until you're more well-versed with the lifestyle of France and the ways of living legally. Cultural integration tips. So obviously try to learn French. You're going to be moving to a new country. It's good to try to learn the language a bit just so you don't feel so secluded. Obviously, if you're going to larger cities like Paris, for example, it's going to be it's going to be easier to speak in English, but you want to get yourself integrated. I mean, you don't want to, squat around and just start talking to people in English for the rest of your life in France. I mean, you can, but it's usually better that you start learning basic French. You can sign up for some classes. And actually what's nice is that once you arrive in France, you have to validate your visa. So you will have to go into a mandatory medical checkup, actually, through the immigration office, which is mandatory to go to because you'll have to sign off and sign pretty much a waiver stating that you will abide by legal, all the French's legals, laws, etc. And also they might test you on your French. And if they think that you need improvement on the French, in your French, they might offer you French language courses actually for free. So that's very nice. Again, other integrations, joining expat communities, social groups, and, even going to understanding what the workplace etiquette is if you're going to be coming over to France for work. Timeline for Social Security and registration, I would, again, yeah, it can range from 3 months to 1 year. It took me 3 years. So that's a different story. It took me 3 years just to get my Social Security. But that's because, again, I was in your position at one point too, so that was a hassle. And language and cultural adjustment, that's always ongoing. That's really depends on you. Common challenges and solutions that I've seen are visa processing delays. Always, again, make sure that you find or book air sorry that you book airplane flights that are cancelable or fundable. Difficulty finding housing, that's definitely another one. Stay patient. It's very different in France. Bureaucratic hurdles and cultural adaptation. Solutions to this is work with a relocation or visa consultant, for example, at Easy Start, network with other expats, and stay patient and proactive. So I guess my final tips and resources for this is just to plan ahead, as Dean said, stay organized, seek professional assistance from Holborn or Easy Start, for example, and embrace the adventures of moving to France. So yeah. But anyway, you have our website below here as well. So feel free to, have a look at our website and to see what we do. We do everything from A to Z at Easy Start, from visa processing, finding housing, opening a bank account, exchange of driver's license, finding schools for children, you name it, we essentially do it. So just feel free to reach out to us if needed. And then, yeah, but I think that's about it, unless, Jean has anything else to ask.
No, that was great, and thank you very much. Very, very comprehensive, and you've covered off everything I think that anyone could need to know about the process pretty much. And I guess one thing that there was a few questions that came in
Okay.
for yourself, which we'll cover off sort of at the end, everyone. But yeah, and really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And of course, if anyone wants to speak to Anne directly and get, a bit more of a tailored understanding of the process, there will be a QR code at the end whereby you can book in a meeting with her. Perfect. So, on to the dreaded tax word. Everybody hates it. Nobody likes paying it. Unfortunately, we can't escape it. Unless, of course, you move to a complete and utter tax haven. But in terms of France, it's relatively straightforward as to why, and when and why when rather you're considered a French tax resident. And it, generally speaking, is when you spend more than 183 days within France within a calendar year, and if France is also your sort of main home, or forgive my French, foyer fiscal, is that right? Would you say, Anne? And if your main economic interests are there, or your business, your employment, investments are all in France, and if effectively your spouse lives there, a few key considerations that you need to consider before moving is your worldwide income will be taxable in France. You will be subject to French wealth tax on any real estate assets worth over 1.3 million euros. Inheritance and gift tax will also apply on your assets worldwide, and capital gains on global investments and property sales may be taxable. And if you're intending to move to France full time, i.e., retire there, and you're planning on disposing of your primary residence, a key kind of tip is to try to get that done ahead of your move. And ideally, sort of if you're going to become a French tax resident, say in 2026, to do that at the back end of 2025 or in the final 6 months of the year. And the issue being that, albeit, for instance, in the UK, your primary residence isn't subject to capital gains tax, you may find that the French tax authorities will try tax you on that sale. So planning ahead is absolutely key, and timing that is imperative. But a little bit about, and just to make it abundantly clear, my section of this webinar is focused on UK expats, and Jacob, of course, will be covering off the US expats and their considerations in terms of investment, savings, and wealth management in general. But in the UK, you'll be very well familiar with ISAs, with premium bonds. They will not hold the same tax wrapper, tax advantages that they do in the UK once you have moved to France. And this is something that you really need to consider prior to moving, because you will get taxed not necessarily heavily, but you will be taxed on the assets, and you won't get your gross free roll up that you normally would get within the UK. And you need not fear, there are equivalents in France, as in the form of the assurance fee, which is an absolutely essential financial planning product. And there are also French compliant investment bonds and saving bonds if you're sort of more looking at more long term view. And property investments as well. There are also tax efficient ownership structures which you can consider to mitigate your tax and ensure that you're running everything as efficiently as possible. In terms of the assurance fee, I'm pretty sure my French isn't great, but it means life assurance. I hope I haven't got that wrong. And here are some of the key points that an assurance fee offers. So it not only offers tax efficiency in the sense that you can grow your capital without having to pay tax on the gain, but you also will get lower tax on withdrawals over time. So after a period of 8 years have elapsed, you will get a tax-free allowance on the gain element of any withdrawals up to €4,600 per annum per person. So if it's a joint policy with yourself and your spouse, you effectively could gain €9,200 per annum tax-free income. And in relation to, and this is more in terms of long-term planning and thinking about your legacy and passing things on to children. If you establish an assurance fee before your 70th birthday, you will be able to nominate multiple beneficiaries and they will receive a tax-free allowance of €152,500 per nomination. And this is, again, key to consider before moving in terms of your age, because if you establish an assurance fee after age 70, the full tax-free inheritance limit is set at 30,500, just flat between all beneficiaries. So important to get that established as soon as possible. As well as that, any, as it mentions here, does reduce tax on amounts exceeding that allowance. So 20% up to 700,000 per beneficiary. In terms of standard inheritance rates, it can be anywhere up to 60% within France. So massive consideration before moving. And to get that planning in place, where are your assets now and what is going to be the best sort of plan to ensure that everything is wrapped up as effectively as possible. And in terms of withdrawal flexibility, there are, you can set up a regular withdrawal from these structures. You can take a yearly amount. It's very, very, very simple. And there are multiple currencies on offer, from Great British pounds to euros, to US dollars, even Swiss francs. So you can, if you want, you can hedge your bets on currency. Personally, I'm of the opinion if you live in the land of the euro, you're better off just using euros. Currency, well, maybe it's just me speaking from experience, but I've certainly been bitten on it. And I think for those of you from the US at the moment are certainly feeling the same way with the US dollar trending downward for the past several months. And moving on again, specific for UK expats in France, how pensions are taxed. You hopefully be aware that there is a double taxation agreement with France and the UK, whereby you won't be getting taxed on both sides of the pond. Your UK state pension will be taxed under general income tax rules, and workplace and private pensions again will be the same, and the same will be said for public sector pensions. Now, one major consideration is when you take a tax-free lump sum, and a bit similar to selling your primary residence, your 25% tax-free lump sum is tax-free in the UK, may not necessarily be in France. So I would again encourage anyone that's considering moving to try take that as early as possible ahead of the move. And there are special circumstances where you can actually cash your pension pot in at 7.5% in France. Again, that depends on your own situation and where it's coming from, and certainly contact a professional and have a consultation in relation to that. And you can transfer. You've got the only real major option there for transferring your pension out of your existing schemes would be an international SIP, which would allow you to have a bit more flexibility and also allow you to have an expatriate financial advisor. Once you leave the UK, unfortunately, your UK advisor, unless they have a very specific license, will be unable to manage your pensions for you. So apologies if I've rushed through that. But of course, if there's any further questions, put them in the Q&A box. There will be a QR code at the end. Feel free to reach or schedule an appointment through that. And with that, I will pass you on to Jacob, who will cover off effectively what you need to know to do with your US assets. Jacob.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dean. Just a little background on myself first. I've been a financial advisor for over a decade now, mostly back in the States, but I've been on the international field for about 3 years now with Holborn, and it's certainly a different battlefield. Now, here's a great example, right? As far as some of the struggles that U.S. citizens have once they move abroad, the assurance vie that Dean was just talking about there, such a great tax planning tool for French tax residents. U.S. citizens don't have access to the assurance vie, and it wouldn't make sense even if we did. We have some of these different restrictions that are really due to FATCA back in the U.S. and the institutions needing to report everything back to the IRS for U.S. citizens' assets that they are holding. On top of that, we have what we call PFICs, which are things that U.S. citizens need to avoid. I think passive foreign investment company is really that acronym. Sorry, I do kind of live in the acronym world all day long, but think of it as a foreign mutual fund or foreign ETF that is actually based in France, as opposed to U.S. ETFs that might even focus on the French stock market. So certainly something that we need to be aware of. And of course, as you make the move, you might also find that you are filing the FBAR on a annual basis. Again, just throwing acronyms out at you real quickly. But if you are making the move and you are in the US currently, I think if you're within 6 months of making the move, it makes sense to start speaking with advisors to really narrow some of this down and figure out what might be right for you. Dean, if we can move to the next one. If he can hear me. Perfect. There we go. Some other challenges also that I should mention, right, as far as your current financial advisor, right? They most likely, I'd say 99% of US-based financial advisors can't actually assist you once you move to France. Even some of the traditional expat investment providers that are US-based can't necessarily help you either. And so that's really where working with selected platforms and advisors that can really structure your assets to be the most tax efficient as possible it is really going to be incredibly beneficial for a French tax resident. Also, Dean touched on it earlier for UK expats, but it is potentially even more advantageous for US citizens to sell their property a year before making the move, or at least the year before you become a French tax resident. Think that 183 days in a year, or having a permanent residence there or business interest there. Certainly great to get that capital gains exemption for 250 for a single person, 500,000 for a married couple. Just something that we want to make sure to take advantage of. I've seen people not even think about it and essentially want to move to France January 1st, sell their house that year, and all of a sudden they are stuck with a much larger tax bill for that property sale than you really even want to think about. This is especially true in a slower real estate market as we're sitting here in mid-November. If you are planning on selling your house in 2026 and you have a plane ticket into France in a few months, we might want to rethink that timeline. Certainly jump on a call with us to make sure that that's going to be in your best interest. Speaking of end of the year and some tax implications, right? We probably want to start looking at any type of tax loss harvest. Now, fortunately for us, right, Dean was talking about the UK dual tax agreement. The US dual tax agreement with France is much better than the UK's. We certainly won that over them. Not that anyone's keeping score other than me, but we certainly, with our investment income, including from retirement accounts, we are just getting taxed in the States. We do not get taxed in France. We certainly have to file, right? And we have to show that income, but we don't actually get taxed on it due to that dual tax agreement, which can be huge for US expats living in France, even in comparison to Portugal and Spain, where I see so many expats going. Of course, as Dean mentioned, with the US political atmosphere, we are seeing so many Americans move over, and a lot of them aren't necessarily thinking about some of this tax planning. So I would say even before, narrowing down which country that you're going to, a lot of times, I mean, I know this is a French-based webinar, but if you're still considering, France might be the right move if you're a US citizen and in retirement. If you're going to be on earned income, you go into that French progressive tax regime. And if you're going to be making a lot of income in France, you're going to have to pay up a good amount on taxes. A couple other points that I want to make. Actually, Dean, if you want to go ahead and move to the next slide.
Can you
he's a tax advisor, or he's a financial advisor, folks, not an IT specialist. I can't see that.
You can't.
Yes, but
you can see
assets,
it. Or you
right?
can. Sorry.
We have so many. I don't even know what's going on there, Dean. But we have so many investment options out there, and not all of them are right for each particular individual. We make sure that everything is tailored to that individual. So our typical process, right, is sitting down with someone for an initial meeting, really finding out their goals and how long they're going to be in France, what their income's looking like, what their budget might be on a monthly basis. And we really narrow down these options and provide you with an investment proposal. We typically schedule a second meeting to make sure that you get all of your questions answered and that we are providing the best possible advice. And then we want to make sure that it's an ongoing and relationship, right? We work with your tax advisors, both in France and in the US or UK, whatever ends up being your final setup. One thing that might help even with visas currently that we're seeing a lot of are annuities, right? But interest rates are still high. They're kind of flying off the shelves right now as interest rates are currently getting cut, and they'll be less attractive. We also have some other fixed return options for those who are maybe getting a little nervous of the US stock market. We can actually even look at euro-based options. As Dean mentioned, right, the US dollar has seen better days against the euro than this year. It's been a pretty rough slide with the interest rate environment continuing to get cut in the US. We're going to see that slide continue for a little bit. So certainly looking at some fixed return options now as interest rates are high can be really advantageous. But I know I tried to go through it as quickly as possible. I know we're almost at an hour for this webinar, and I want to make sure that we get the opportunity to answer some of these mini questions. But if you are a US expat looking to move to France here in the near term, please go ahead and book in. Obviously UK and non-US citizens with Dean. And then, well, look at that. He's making it easy to book into our diaries. And of course, all residents of any country looking to move to France and is going to be the best resource out there.
Thanks so much, Jacob. Oh, you guys too.
Thank you, Jacob. I think I redeemed myself from an IT perspective there. I was so intuitive to what you were saying. I took it personally when you doubted me just then. Thank you very much, Jacob. That was brilliant. And as Jacob mentioned, you've got access to my own diary there. If you're from the UK or another EU country looking to make the move to France, it can certainly help. Easy start and QR code as well if you're looking to discuss everything about relocating, and they'll certainly be able to provide assistance. And of course, if you're from the US and you want to get a better understanding of how to manage your existing investments and also what other options you're going to have when you arrive on the ground in France, please use Jacob's QR code on the end. So there's a few questions came in, so we'll do our best to answer those before time is up. If anything doesn't get answered, I will be sending out a recording probably tomorrow, if not on Friday. And of course, you can feel free to answer any questions to myself directly, or if it's specific to either Anne or Jacob's business and what they can assist with, I'd probably recommend scheduling a consultation to get sort of more tailored and streamlined advice. So, and there was a few questions came in for you, so I'm going to put you on the spot now and see just how much you do know without my meticulously crafted slides. So the first question was, this is quite a niche one in my opinion. If I buy a home in France before moving and rent it out, when I do eventually make the move, since the French leases tend to be for 1 year, if the tenants are still within the property they purchased, can they still use that address to fulfill their requirement for the visa?
Yes, if they own the home, they can use this, property for the visa. If they can prove that they have, you have your deed, that's no problem. Again, normally what you want to do though is be as transparent as possible. For example, if you do have tenants in your home that you purchased, it's usually better to get an Airbnb, of course, and kind of explain the situation. However, having a deed in France does support your visa in general. So I think I hope I answered that question. But yes, you can use your address. You want to give your deed, but normally what we try to be as transparent as possible. Maybe get a temporary place and use that address, and then in your motivational letter explain that you have a property and that someone's in it, etc. They want transparency.
Very good. And another one for you, Anne. If I initially get a self-employed work visa to move to France, do that for a year or two, and then want to retire, is it difficult to then change to a retirement visa? As the person who's asked is getting closer to retirement age, but would need to work a bit longer before they are ready.
That's perfectly fine. Yes, you can be on a self-employment visa and switch very very easily to a long stay visitor visa, a retirement visa. It's no problem. I would say the hardest ones to switch over is if you're on a long stay visitor visa and you end up finding a job. You can't do that because in the eyes of the French government, you're taking a job from a French person. So if you were to apply for another type of visa from a long stay visitor visa, normally they require you to go back to your home country and apply for that there.
Excellent.
That's something, however, that's kind of a gray area as well. So if you're in a long stay visitor visa, it's not that impossible, but you have a higher chance of rejection based on that.
Yeah, there's always a few nuances, and I'm sure there's a few tricks of the trade.
It depends on the person who's looking at your application too, if they're having a bad day.
Yeah, I think I've found that because I've just recently moved to Portugal, everyone, just to let you know, from Spain a couple of months ago. And I've got an Irish passport, so admittedly for me it was very straightforward. Admittedly, it was the first day I walked in with my Irish passport. I walked to the front of the queue in the tax office, thinking that everyone was going to bow down to me. Turns out I still have to make an appointment like everyone else. And I'm pretty sure they were just having a bad day. They didn't like the look of me, but I strode in full of pride about my Irish passport. But yeah, I think it can be literally as simple as that. And one more question for you, Anne, as well. I'm an Italian citizen. My spouse is a USA citizen. What does she need to stay in France? A visa or something else?
Well, those who are married to a European citizen can come over without a visa, actually. What's weird is that if you're married to a French person, they have to come over on a long stay visitor visa. So this is something that we can talk about, one-on-one. But if you, let's say, if you're Italian, you move over to France with your wife, and if she's a US citizen, she can come over without a visa. But once she arrives in France, she has to apply for what we call a carte de séjour. So a family reunification visa, which is done online. You would have to obviously provide your marriage certificate and everything like that. There's a lot of documentation to be provided, and the process is pretty straightforward, but it can get confusing. So if you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to help you.
Perfect. Another question on here. I think we mentioned if my house only sells once I'm in France, then I might be hit with French taxes. Is that true? If so, I would need to make sure it sells before I leave the US. Yes, absolutely ensure that you get that done before any move.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Dean, for organizing this. Appreciate it.